Hey there! Today I want to attempt to do a review of the Parker Vacumatic, and I say attempt because I haven't really used this pen terribly much. I don't tend to use my vintage pens all that often. If I do, I use them once a week perhaps, just to keep them, flowing well and all that. But yeah, anyway, this is my Parker Vacumatic. I'm pretty sure this is the 3rd gen laminated golden pearl speedline filler vac. Which is somewhere around, it was produced somewhere around the 1940s, 1942, I think, to the 1948, I think. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. And I'm pretty sure that's what I have here. I think this is a 1943 model. Oh, there it goes. But with the Vacumatics, there's so many different types, there's so many different models, and so many different years, and so many different colors to choose from that your Vacumatic might be completely different in terms of how it looks and how it feels to mine. But I'm talking about mine here. I'm pretty sure it's a junior because it's small. It's relatively small. Although vintage pens do tend to be way smaller anyway. But I'm pretty sure that this is a junior. And this being the 3rd generation, it has this band as opposed to like 3 stripes. So it has this nice looking band with some let me see if I can zoom in on that, with some nice carvings, engravings on them. I think it perfectly suits this color, the golden pearl. I really love how this pen looks. So here we have the clip. It has Parker engraved in it, the arrow clip, very distinctive. Hallmark of all Parker pens, even now. This is a nice and flexible clip, if I can just get around to it. Yeah, it's very nice and flexible, very easy to pry. So, it's a very usable clip. Not that I would clip this to my shirt, because this pen loves to leak. After all, it is an old pen. Absolutely beautiful. And here is where you can see the ink. It's basically like an ink window that they've incorporated into this finish here. I think that looks really nice. My pen isn't in the best of conditions, so I think it might be dragging down the pen a little bit. But it really looks great in person, even though this is well past this pen's prime here. Of course, at the back here there is a nice little blind cap that you twist open, and you press this here to fill up the ink. After all, it is, a vacuum fill. And there's a second side that you kind of squeeze to get ink. And the cap twists off with barely any turning and reveals the 14 karat Parker nib. Get a kind of a close-up on that. Now this is obviously an old nib, quite old, and I've heard many things about the nibs on these pens. They're quite different depending on which country these pens are sold in and what models you get. Like, it could be very flexy, it could be completely rigid, it could be wet, it could be scratchy, it could be very smooth. I don't think there is a standard for these nibs, especially back then. So mine started off very smooth and wet, and now it's kind of scratchy but still wet. It definitely doesn't flex though. This is not a flex nib by any means. And this is where I can talk about one of my problems with this pen. This pen tends to kind of leak right here between the section and the actual pen body itself, because over here the only thing keeping it together is there's obviously a thread inside, and then there's some beeswax, I think, or some sealant. And over the years, the sealant obviously depreciates and degrades, and now the seal isn't that strong anymore, and ink starts to pour out of this when I write. And it's worse because I hold my pen right about here, with my finger right above the threads, like the section here. And my hands, the skin on my hands, acts like paper, and it draws up ink from this little slit here. So it's pulling ink into my finger. So it's pulling ink into the page and into my finger at the same time, which isn't pleasant every time when I write and I have to clean out my finger. So I disassembled the pen and I used some beeswax, and now that problem is fixed. So it's not a big deal, and I did fix it in the end, but it might be of note to some of you if you don't want to have to fix your pens after you get them. But then again, with vintage pens, that's kind of a given. Something will probably be wrong with it. You have to expect that. And some people may not like the fact that it's kind of small. I don't mind. I quite enjoy small pens. Actually, I think I'm more suited to writing with small pens than bigger ones. I don't know, that's just kind of how I am. But if you don't like small pens, this might not be the pen for you because it's really not big. I mean, it's not terribly small, but it's definitely not big. It's like medium. Now, of course, one reason to absolutely consider getting this pen, besides its history, and besides the fact that it's a vintage pen, is just the finish. It's celluloid and it's so beautiful. I mean, just look at that. If my phone will focus, there you go. Absolutely stunning. I don't think any modern pen can compare to the prowess of this. This pen captivates me every time I look at it. I think it's just so beautiful, and it's not even that expensive. It's like, well, you could find one for something over 100 USD, right? Over $100 you could find a pen like this, which I think is a great deal. Obviously you're taking away some of the reliability of new pens. You're taking away some of the perhaps the writing performance, debatably, of new pens. But I think just for this finish, just to experience the history of a pen like this, I think it's absolutely worth it. Because if you think about it, you're basically carrying on this pen's story. You're a part of its story, you know. You're taking the baton from the God knows how many owners have come before you, and you're continuing this pen's legacy. And I think that is really, really beautiful. And that's why I think vintage pens in general are a really fascinating thing, and that's why I really buy them. But this pen, absolutely blowing it out of the water for me. I love this pen. So, I think it's time that I go ahead and give you a writing sample. Okay, now for the writing sample. It's been a while since I've written cursive. I've been doing so much typing nowadays on my computer. But it's good to be back writing on paper. It feels way better than typing. So this is the Parker Vacumatic with a 14-karat nib. The ink is, rather appropriately, Parker Quink. And it's black, quite obviously. The paper is Rhodia, as always. I say always, but I've only really made one video about fountain pens, but you know, whatever. So, wow, my handwriting is not good. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Yeah, I definitely need some practice to get back into writing with fountain pens. This is absolutely horrendous. Okay, let's see wetness. Obviously quite wet there, but quite scratchy as well. I'll be honest, it's quite a scratchy pen. If only you could hear the sound this pen makes. I actually quite like it though. I think this pen makes a great sound when it writes, but it is kind of loud. And then for line variation, I don't want to push this pen too hard, but yeah, there is none, basically. There is almost no line variation. And then in terms of the strokes, it's quite even. Although there is a lot more resistance when I go horizontally. You can see it kind of skips a little bit, as opposed to if I go vertically. So that's something. I mean, it could just be my nib. That's a little damaged, perhaps. And then fast writing doesn't keep up so well. there's a little bit of skipping, as you can see. But, you know, vintage pen, what do you really expect? So yeah, that's about it.